In a world where whispers spark wars, one tweet lit the fuse. This is the story of how Donald Trump's words, moves, and timing may have scripted a path from social media to shockwaves over Tehran and brought us closer than ever to the edge of catastrophe. In 2011, Donald Trump warned, Obama will start a war with Iran to win re-election. At the time, it sounded like political noise. 13 years later, it's Trump posting, everyone should evacuate Tehran. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The date? June 17, 2025. Just days after he authorized strike plans, and hours before missiles lit up Iranian skies. What once seemed like a conspiracy theory now feels like a blueprint. The question is no longer if he meant it. It's how long ago he planned it. On June 13, 2025, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, "Something big is happening in the Middle East. We knew everything." The statement offered no details, but within hours, Israel launched a series of coordinated airstrikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure, including sites in Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordow. These attacks marked the beginning of Operation Rising Lion, a joint Israeli-US military campaign targeting Iran's underground uranium enrichment facilities and air defense systems. This was not a spontaneous military action, but the execution of a premeditated strategy involving precision targeting and logistical coordination. Later reports confirmed that Trump had reviewed and approved operational strike plans days in advance during high-level briefings with U.S. defense officials. The fact that Trump's vague public statement closely preceded a complex, multinational strike suggests a deliberate alignment between messaging and military timing. The sequence, from internal authorization to external communication to execution, follows a structured pattern, not a reactive one. On June 17, 2025, Senator Rand Paul publicly criticized the joint U.S.-Israeli airstrikes on Iran during an interview on Piers Morgan Uncensored. In his exact words, Paul stated, "This would be a terrible mistake, a catastrophic escalation. If we attack Iran, we will be at war in the Middle East for the next decade." Paul's warning wasn't about logistics, it was about strategy. He questioned the lack of congressional authorization, highlighting that launching a major military strike without debate in Congress violates the War Powers Resolution. He further argued that the mission had no clearly defined end goal, no exit strategy, and risked dragging America into another open-ended conflict, similar to Iraq and Afghanistan. His framing of the strike as a terrible mistake wasn't ideological, it was procedural and constitutional. He emphasized that wars shouldn't be launched by social media posts and briefings behind closed doors, but through formal debate, accountability, and bipartisan consensus. On June 18, 2025, Tucker Carlson, speaking during a live stream and in a podcast appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience, voiced sharp criticism of both the Biden and Trump camps for enabling what he described as a militarized theater in the Middle East. Referring to Trump's role in the Iran strikes, he said, "It's one thing to talk about stopping nukes. It's another to casually launch 70 airstrikes and then post about regime change. I'd like to know, who's actually steering this?" Carlson was not arguing in defense of Iran. His concern was about unrestrained military action and the potential for escalation with no congressional mandate and no transparent communication with the public. He drew comparisons to the Iraq War narrative in 2003, accusing both political parties of letting unelected people make war decisions. His comments gained traction particularly because Carlson has long been a key opinion shaper among conservative and libertarian-leaning voters. His criticism of Trump, usually a strong ally, signaled to many that the right-wing base wasn't unified behind this operation. On June 21, 2025, the United States formally entered the escalating Iran-Israel conflict with Operation Vigilant Reprisal, a joint offensive coordinated with Israeli forces. The operation involved 75 precision airstrikes targeting suspected Iranian nuclear and ballistic missile infrastructure across Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. According to U.S. Department of Defense briefings, the strikes included the deployment of 14 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs, specifically designed to neutralize hardened underground facilities, source, DoD press release, June 21st. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, launched from Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, executed the mission. These aircraft refueled mid-air with KC-135 tankers over the Arabian Sea, entered Iranian airspace undetected, and exited without incident. Iranian radar systems, either jammed or strategically bypassed, did not register the inbound jets until after impact. Within hours, former President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, calling the mission a spectacular military success. Every American should be proud. We took out the threat. Now they know we don't bluff. However, in the same thread, Trump cautioned that any retaliatory act by Iran would be met with far greater force. When asked by Fox reporter Emily Compagno whether the goal was regime change, Trump denied it, stating, "This is about nukes, not governments." Yet, many military analysts found the scale and timing of the strike hard to ignore. The precision, coordination with Israeli units, and deep penetration targeting suggested months of intelligence buildup and contingency planning, not a reactive maneuver. So, while the administration insists this was a limited preemptive strike, the use of bunker busters and long-range stealth bombers marks a significant escalation, one that reflects planning beyond mere deterrence. In the immediate aftermath of the June 21st airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites, Trump changed tone. On June 22, 2025, he wrote on Truth Social, "It's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA." That post followed the use of multiple bunker buster bombs across Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, while top U.S. officials, Vice President Vance and Defense Secretary Hegseth, insisted the mission was strictly about halting Iran's nuclear program. This social media statement marked the first time Trump publicly floated the concept of regime change since the strikes. The contradiction is clear. June 21st, strikes carried out with the stated goal of preventing nuclear proliferation. June 22nd, Trump opens the door to regime change in Tehran, using all-caps emphasis. That sequence shows more than just mixed messaging. It signals a strategic narrative shift, one that broadens the mission beyond nuclear containment. By June 16, 2025, Tehran had become the epicenter of a rapidly escalating conflict. Iranian officials reported approximately 580 civilian deaths and 1,300 injuries resulting from consecutive Israeli and U.S. airstrikes on key nuclear and military targets. Hospitals in Tehran and surrounding areas were overwhelmed, forcing residents to seek shelter underground. In response, Iran's parliament voted on June 22nd to consider closing the Strait of Hormuz, a crucial choke point responsible for transporting nearly 20% of the world's oil supply. The move triggered immediate market reactions. Brent crude surged over 10 to 14%, reaching around $77 per barrel, the highest since January, while global markets displayed volatility as investors flocked to safe haven assets like gold and treasury bonds. The force of the strikes in Tehran reverberated well beyond city limits, causing economic shockwaves, straining diplomatic alliances, and sending alarm signals across global supply chains. On June 20th, European foreign ministers from the UK, France, and Germany met in Geneva with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, urging Tehran to engage in nuclear and regional de-escalation talks. Iran insisted negotiations could only move forward if Israeli airstrikes stopped first, echoing demands made in prior April-May indirect talks mediated by Oman. At the same time, President Trump suggested he might send envoys such as Steve Witkoff or Vice President J.D. Vance to participate, stating he would decide on further U.S. military involvement within 2 weeks. Diplomats described the Geneva meeting as fragile and inconclusive. with Tehran calling European proposals unrealistic and unlikely to yield progress. With strikes already executed and military assets on standby, the session underscored a glaring reality. Diplomacy was underway, but the conflict had already been set in motion. The pattern isn't loud, it hums beneath the surface. A warning tweet here, a vague post there, followed by shockingly precise military action. Not once, but repeatedly. Messaging that looks casual, but lines up eerily with classified decisions. Rhetoric about peace, immediately followed by talk of regime change. Dissent within allies, yet the machine moves forward. This isn't randomness. It feels rehearsed, like a script we've seen before, just with new actors and a new stage. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. Because if these moves were deliberate, then the next ones probably are too. And if they weren't, then who's really in control? Key takeaways. Iraq redux? Warning without proof. Did we repeat 2003's WMD script? Forever war risks? Will this become another decade lost, like Afghanistan? Nuclear dilemma. Did we delay or accelerate Iran's nuclear ambitions? Proliferation pressure. Will regional actors race to nuclear capability when nukes attract bombs? Time will tell. But for now, this isn't just history. It's a real-time geopolitical thriller, and we're watching the script unfold. Subscribe to stay tuned for part 2.